Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The razor blade felt ice cold against the pulse of his throat, and for the first time in months, Julian felt more alive than he had since the accident took his sight. Tilt your head back, Julian. You're trembling. The voice was low, wrapped in a velvet baritone that vibrated through Julian's chest, dark and terrifyingly familiar, though he couldn't place from where. Julian gripped the arms of the velvet chair, his knuckles turning white. He was a man who used to command boardrooms, who built skyscrapers that pierced the heavens, a man who looked down on the world. Now, he was sitting in the dark, defenseless, his chin tilted up by the strong, calloused fingers of a man he had hired only 3 days ago. A man who smelled of sandalwood and rain, and whose touch lingered on Julian's skin like a burn. "I can shave myself," Julian snapped, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You cut yourself 3 times yesterday," the caretaker replied, the razor gliding smoothly down the vulnerable column of Julian's neck. "You hired me to be your eyes. Let me be your hands, too." There was a double meaning there, a heavy, suffocating implication that made the air in the penthouse thick. Julian couldn't see the expression on the man's face, but he could feel the weight of a stare, predatory, intense, and suffocatingly hungry. This wasn't just a nurse. This was a wolf invited into the sheepfold, and Julian, stripped of his vision, had no idea just how sharp the teeth were until the jaws were already closing. 6 months ago, Julian Vane was the architect of the century. He was arrogant, brilliant, and untouchable. He moved through life with the precision of a scalpel, cutting away anyone who didn't meet his impossible standards. He had money, prestige, and a cold, solitary existence that he claimed to prefer. Then came the site accident. A structural failure, a collapse, a cloud of caustic dust and debris. Julian woke up in a hospital bed to a world of absolute, crushing darkness. The doctors spoke of corneal damage, of potential recovery, but mostly of adjustment. Julian did not adjust. He raged. He fired 3 nurses in the first week. He threw vases he couldn't see at walls he couldn't find. He sat in the center of his sprawling, silent penthouse, a king in a tomb, refusing to learn Braille, refusing to use a cane, refusing to accept that he was broken. Then came Elias. The agency had sent him as a last resort. He is specialized in difficult cases, the agency director had said over the phone, her voice tight. He is highly qualified, though his methods are unorthodox. When Elias arrived, he didn't introduce himself with the pitying softness Julian had grown to loathe. He walked in with heavy, deliberate footsteps. He didn't ask if he could come in. He simply entered, the sound of the heavy oak door closing like the seal on a vault. "Your apartment is a hazard," Elias had said. "No, hello, Mr. Vane. No, I'm sorry for your loss. Just a critique. I didn't hire a critic. I hired a servant." Julian had spat back, turning his head toward the voice. "You hired a handler," Elias corrected smoothly. "Because right now, you aren't living. You're just rotting in the dark." Julian had tried to fire him on the spot. Elias simply didn't leave. He made coffee, black, no sugar, exactly how Julian liked it, despite Julian never telling him. He rearranged the furniture not for aesthetics, but for a blind man's logic, creating paths Julian could navigate without shin-splintering collisions. Now it was day 4. The shaving incident in the morning had left Julian rattled. Elias was too competent, too familiar. He moved through the penthouse as if he had lived there for years. That evening, a storm battered the city. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, glass that Julian used to look out of to admire his skyline, now just cold barriers against a noisy world. Julian sat at his grand piano. He hadn't played since the accident. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. Music had been his secondary language, a mathematical beauty he understood as well as steel and glass. But now, without the sheet music, without the visual anchor of the keys, he felt lost. "Play." Elias's voice came from the shadows of the room. Julian flinched. "I didn't hear you walk in. I know how to walk quietly." "I can't play," Julian whispered, the admission tasting like ash. "I can't see the keys." "You don't need to see them. You know them. You built this world in your mind before you ever put it on paper. The piano is no different." Footsteps approached. Closer. closer, until Julian could feel the body heat radiating from the man standing directly behind the piano bench. Elias leaned over, his chest pressing lightly against Julian's back. He reached out, covering Julian's hands with his own. Elias's hands were larger, rougher, enveloping Julian's slender, artist fingers. "Middle C is here," Elias whispered, his breath hot against Julian's ear. He guided Julian's finger down. A clear, resonant note rang out. "I know where middle C is," Julian hissed, trying to pull away. "Do you?" Elias didn't let go. His grip tightened, shifting from guidance to restraint. "Then why are you terrified to touch it?" "I am not, you are. You're terrified that if you try and fail, you'll confirm that the great Julian Vane is truly finished." Elias's voice dropped an octave, darker now. "But you're not finished, Julian. You're just under new management." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. This was insubordination. This was madness. "Let go of me." No. The refusal was absolute. Elias guided Julian's hands, forcing them to play a scale. Up, down, then a chord. A minor triad, mournful and resolving. "Who are you?" Julian breathed, the question finally escaping him. "You know my coffee order. You know the layout of my study before I showed you. You know my music. Who are you?" Elias chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a shiver of fear and something dangerously like arousal down Julian's spine. "You really don't remember, do you? I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You never looked down, Julian. You only looked up." Elias moved his hands from Julian's fingers to his wrists, pinning them to the edge of the keyboard. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing the shell of Julian's ear. 5 years ago, the indistinct architectural firm, the scholarship student whose final thesis you ripped apart in front of the board. You called my design derivative trash and soulless. You cost me my internship. You cost me my degree. Julian's breath hitched. The memory was a blur, one of 100 critiques he had given. He was ruthless. It was his trademark. He destroyed mediocrity to protect the sanctity of the art. I critiqued hundreds of students. My name was Kalen then, Elias whispered. But names change. Obsessions don't. Julian tried to twist free, panic rising in his throat. "You're here for revenge. You're going to kill me." "Kill you?" "Elias." Kalen laughed softly. He released Julian's wrists only to slide his hands up Julian's arms, gripping his shoulders, massaging the tense muscles there with a possessive familiarity. "If I wanted to kill you, I would have let you walk into traffic 3 days ago. If I wanted you dead, I would have let you starve. Then what do you want?" Julian cried out, blind and trapped in the embrace of a ghost from his past. "I want to rewrite you," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You destroyed my world because you said it lacked soul. So, I spent 5 years watching you, studying you, learning what you love, what you hate, how you breathe. I realized you were right, Julian. My work was soulless. Because my soul wasn't in the buildings. It was in you." The confession was twisted, a dark adoration born of hatred and awe. It was the logic of a stalker, of a man who had stared into the sun until he went blind, and now found the sun had gone dark, too. "You're insane," Julian whispered. "And you are helpless," Kalen countered brutally. "You need me. You can't eat without me. You can't dress without me. You can't live without me. Fate broke you, Julian, so that I could put you back together. My way." Kalen's hand moved up to Julian's neck, his thumb pressing against the pulse point, just hard enough to threaten, just soft enough to caress. "So," Kalen murmured, "are you going to fire me? Or are you going to play?" Julian trembled. The rational part of his brain screamed to run, to call the police, to flee into the storm. But the darker part of him, the part that had always been lonely at the top, the part that secretly craved a force strong enough to match his own, stayed rooted to the bench. Slowly, shakily, Julian placed his fingers on the keys. He began to play a nocturne. It was hesitant at first, but Kalen stayed there, his body a solid wall of heat behind Julian, his presence a terrifying anchor. As the days turned into weeks, the dynamic in the penthouse shifted. It became a silent war of attrition. Julian tested Kalen constantly. He threw tantrums, he made impossible demands, he insulted Kalen's cooking, his voice, his past. Kalen took it all with an infuriating calm. He punished Julian not with violence, but with absence. If Julian was cruel, Kalen would simply stop speaking. He would still perform his duties. The food would appear, the bath would be drawn, but the silence was deafening. In the dark, silence was the worst punishment of all. It forced Julian to reach out, to ask, to beg for a response. And when Julian broke, when he asked for a conversation or a touch, Kalen would reward him. A hand lingering on his shoulder. A deep massage for his aching temples. A reading of architectural journals in that hypnotic voice. Julian began to crave the touch. It was a betrayal of his pride, a sickness. He found himself waiting for the sound of Kalen's footsteps. He found himself dressing with more care, wondering if Kalen was looking at him. The blindness had stripped Julian of his armor. He couldn't hide his reactions. He couldn't glare effectively. He couldn't mask the flush on his skin when Kalen helped him out of the bath, the rough towel drying his back with slow, deliberate friction. "You're getting better," Kalen said one evening. They were in the living room. Kalen was reading a blueprint description to Julian, allowing Julian to visualize the structure in his mind. "I see it," Julian murmured, eyes closed. "The cantilever. It's too heavy on the west side." "You're right," Kalen said. "I'll adjust it." "You're designing again?" Julian asked, surprised. "I never stopped. I just designed for an audience of one now." There was a silence, heavy and charged. "Why are you still here, Kalen?" Julian asked, his voice quiet. "You proved your point. You have me dependent on you. You won. Is that what you think this is? A game of winning and losing?" Kalen's voice moved. He was walking toward the sofa where Julian sat. "Isn't it? You hated me." "I hated you," Kalen admitted. He stood directly in front of Julian. "I hated you because you were everything I wanted to be. And then, I saw you break. And I realized I didn't want to be you. I wanted to keep you." Kalen knelt. Julian heard the rustle of fabric. Then, he felt hands on his knees, spreading them apart gently. Julian gasped, his body tensing, but he didn't pull away. "You're not blind to this," Kalen whispered, his hands sliding up Julian's thighs. "I know you feel it. The tension. The heat. You've been arrogant your whole life, Julian. You thought you were above desire. You thought you were above me. I am above you," Julian stammered, clinging to the shreds of his ego. "I am the master of this house." "Are you?" Kalen challenged. His hands reached Julian's waist. He leaned forward, burying his face in Julian's stomach, inhaling deeply. "A master sees. A master commands. Right now, you are entirely at my mercy. If I leave, you are alone in the dark. If I stay, you belong to me." Julian's hands found Kalen's hair. It was soft, thick. He gripped it, intending to push the man away, but instead, his fingers curled into the strands, holding on. "I don't belong to anyone," Julian said, but the words lacked conviction. "Prove it," Kalen growled against his shirt. "Push me away." Julian froze. His heart pounded like a trapped bird. He could end this. He could kick Kalen away, scream, fire him, call security. But the darkness was so cold, and Kalen was so warm. The hatred between them had burned so hot it had turned into something else, something molten and magnetic. Julian's voice failed. Kalen took that as the surrender it was. He moved up, capturing Julian's lips in a kiss that was bruising, demanding, and tasting of years of suppressed obsession. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a reclamation. Kalen kissed him like he was searching for the soul he claimed Julian had stolen. Julian gasped, his mouth opening, allowing the invasion. He tasted coffee and mint and danger. For the first time in his life, Julian wasn't leading. He was following. He was falling backward into the cushions, Kalen's heavy weight pressing him down, grounding him in the physical world when his visual world was gone. "Say it," Kalen murmured against his lips, his hand moving to unbutton Julian's shirt with practiced dexterity. "Say you want this." "I hate you," Julian sobbed, arching his back as Kalen's cool hand touched his bare chest. "That's not a no." Kalen bit lightly at Julian's collarbone. "I want." Julian squeezed his eyes shut, though it made no difference. "I want to see you." Kalen paused. The room went still. "You can't," Kalen said, his voice laced with a strange sorrow. "I want to see the man who defeated me." "You aren't defeated, Julian," Kalen whispered, kissing his eyelids softly, a stark contrast to the roughness of before. "You're just cherished." in a way you don't understand yet. Kalen pulled back slightly. Open your eyes. It's pitch black. Open them anyway. Julian opened his unseeing eyes. He stared into the abyss. But in the abyss, he felt Kalen's forehead rest against his own. I am right here, Kalen promised. I will always be the thing you see in the dark. I will be your architect now. I will build a world around you where you are safe, but you have to let me in. No more walls. And if I refuse, then I'll break them down, Kalen said simply. Brick by brick. Until there's nothing left but us. Julian realized then that the accident hadn't just taken his sight, it had given him a shadow. A shadow that breathed, and wanted, and loved with a terrifying intensity. He wrapped his arms around Kalen's neck, pulling him down. Build it then, Julian whispered into the darkness. But make it beautiful. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian surrender his control to the one man he underestimated, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments. Would you forgive a lover who watched you suffer just to save you? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.